Hey, what's up guys? It's your boy Bofa, and if you put your reading glasses on, you already know that today we're gonna see if we can beat Dark Souls 2 only using bows. Also, I'm gonna give a random commenter one of these Iron Fist Alexander models from the hit game Dark Souls 7, and I'll pick a random comment after 1 week, so make sure you check your replies. Alright, first thing we have to do is make our character, and obviously you're gonna want to pick the Bandit class since it's the only one that starts with a bow and a generous 25 arrows. And for the starting gift, I chose the seed of a tree giant because the description says it's inedible and I wanted to test that. Our first priority is finding a way to buy some arrows because surprisingly 25 of them just isn't enough to get through the entire game, and since this dipshit lost his key, we need to go get that before he'll sell us any. So I hustled my way over to this lady, but unfortunately we need 1,000 V-Bucks to buy the key from her, so instead I mosey on over to the Dragon Rider and... Once we defeat him, we now have enough to buy the battle pass and a metric ass ton of arrows, but don't use his boss soul just yet because you can trade it for a pretty good bow later on. First thing I did was take out a bunch of these guys, which does take quite a while. Probably would have been faster if my aim wasn't dog shit, but I did find this fella, and after spamming through his dialogue talking about Chief Keefe about this, Chief Keefe about that, he will give you a key to the mansion in Majula, so you can get an Estus shard pretty early. After that, I took on the slightly early version of the Pursuer in the hopes that I would get the ring that boosts your attack damage, but if you die here, he does move to his regular arena, which is like only 5 feet away, but still. And this fight sucks ass. As you can see, I am not doing very much damage, and if you've noticed, my bow is already at like half durability, and you bet that that shit broke about halfway through the fight and made me do even less damage. Although it did only take me from 13 to 10 damage, so it's not that bad, but I still used almost 200 arrows in this fight, including all the iron ones, which might have been a stupid choice, but I didn't want to spend any more time on this fight than I had to, which was about 15 to 20 minutes in case you were wondering. After a bit more running around, I quickly got access to old Butthole Face, so let's take him out real quick. Once I started the fight, I was shocked, surprised, and or baffled about how much damage I was doing, and you can target either one of his legs or his chest, but sadly neither of his buttholes. You do the same amount of damage regardless of where you hit him, so it really doesn't matter. All you really have to do is just run between his legs, wait for him to swing and miss, and just start unloading some arrows into him. Eventually he rips off his arm and tries to whack you with it because why not? Doesn't really change the strategy, so you just keep doing the same thing. And I don't mean to pat myself on the back because I'd probably have to bend my arm really weird, but I did manage to get a no-hitter on this man.
Through another no-hitter in this game. A perfect game.
Now that he's taken care of, we could head off to No Man's Wharf. Fun fact, did you know that you can just shoot the bell with your bow that calls the ship for the boss fight? Pretty neat, huh? And if you really want to, you could farm the enemies here to get the sea bow, which does have better range, but I didn't do that because I have free will and it didn't really seem worth it in my opinion. And through my journey so far, I've managed to snag a handful of fire arrows, and conveniently, the Flexile Sentry is allergic to fire, so I decided to take those in with me. This is another easy one due to there being a well-constructed pole right in the middle of the arena, so you can just circle around that the entire fight, wait for him to attack, shimmy out of the way, and start filling him up with some arrows. And I don't want to jerk myself off or anything because I'm in public using the McDonald's Wi-Fi right now, but this was yet another no-hitter, baby. Before I continue to the next location and get myself a shiny new bow, there's a couple other rings that I want to get that I honestly should have got earlier. For the first one, I head back to the Things Betwixt to take down this ogre and get the stone ring, which makes you do more poise damage, which will make it easier to stun enemies with arrows. Next, we head back to the Tower of Flame and head over to the old Dragon Rider. Again, this one wasn't too tough. I was getting my cheeks clapped at first for a little while until I figured out his attack pattern and basically just kept circling around the arena. If you're lucky, you'll get him stuck in this loop of doing this jumping slam attack over and over, and sometimes he'll even do this big old butt slam with some stanky dark fart aura coming out of him when he lands, but that's all there is to it. Upon beating him, you get the old Leo ring, which boosts your thrust counter attack damage, which basically means that you do extra damage anytime you shoot an enemy during an attack animation, which is a lot more often than you'd think. Eventually I make it to the Ruined Sentinels, and I saved those poison arrows that I bought earlier, which they happen to be weak to, so I equipped those before the fight. Definitely the toughest boss so far, but you can make it a lot easier if you do a few things. First, make sure that you're actually skilled enough to take down this first guy up on the platform, which isn't too bad. Just wait for him to do an attack, roll behind him, and shoot him with 1 or 2 poison arrows. Keep repeating that process until he gets poisoned, and then switch to your iron arrows since you don't want to waste your poison ones. He does lose a big chunk of health, but you do still have to finish him off with the regular arrows. And as soon as you do, aim your sights down at the other one down here and start firing as many poison arrows into him as you can before he leaps up onto the platform. At this point, I would just not stay locked on and try to track which one you've already damaged and poison him again as soon as he stops taking damage. Once he's dead, it's a one-on-one fight and you don't really need the poison arrows anymore, unless you're bad. And that's basically it. And if you already used your poison arrows, then good luck, dipshit, because you played yourself. Now I just need to find the guy I can trade boss souls with so I can get a new bow, but first I need to find another fragrant branch of yore. So I buy the cat ring, hop skip down the well, skip hop down these structures, take some acid, watch the walls melt,
Freaking out, man.
and make my way through the entire upper gutter level. Roll through these barrels of high C, grab my loot, and free my homie from the pen, only for him to call me a fucking idiot.
Cursed one, you lack intelligence. Weak, so terribly weak.
Which is when I learned that you need at least 3 faith and 3 intelligence to trade with him. So I level my faith and trade the Dragon Rider's immortal soul for a bow. And it's decent. Would be better with more intelligence since it does magic damage, but it's good enough as is. And after upgrading our bow, it's time to face the gargoyles. It's another tough one. Definitely harder than the Ruined Sentinels because they are resistant to poison, but they are weak to magic. As soon as it started, I just shot the first one as many times as I could, and after that, it's just a whole lot of running in circles. Round and round and round we go. I used the Dragon Rider bow since, like I said, they're weak to magic, and I basically only had time to take 1 shot between attacks anyway, since there's like 3 enemies all trying to stab and burn you at the same time. I did almost die at one point because I got stuck on this statue while one of them was cooking me at 350 degrees for 5 seconds or until golden brown, but other than that, there's really not much else to it. It just takes forever. After the fight, make sure you grab this key for the Lost Sinner so you can light up the room and actually be able to lock on, because otherwise you're going to be free aiming the whole time. And despite me getting my ass absolutely ate up for the first half of the fight, this one was considerably easier than the last couple. Once again, I chose to use the Dragon Rider bow since she's weak to magic, and once I learned to dodge towards her instead of away from her like a rational human being would, it got a lot easier. I would basically just wait for her to do an attack, dodge into her, and give her a shot or 2. Rinse and repeat. GG, Lost Sinner. But not really. Now I could head towards the next area, and most of the enemies die in like 1 or 2 hits, except for this guy. And I'm gonna save the chariot boss for later so I can go take on the spooky skeleton lords real quick. I upgraded my short bow because I know this fight has a ton of spooky, scary skeletons that chase and roll at you, so I want to stay nimble and light on my feet so I can quickly roll out of the way of all their spooky attacks. At first, it's just you and 3 skeleton lords, and after I straight up pissed myself from the sheer spookiness of it all, I took the first one out and aggravated the roly boys. These are probably the most dangerous enemies in this fight, so I just hide behind this pillar and then slowly take them all out. For some reason, instead of taking out the other 2 skeleton lords one at a time, I decided to take them both out at the same time, which summons an absolute army of spooky skeletons since they always spawn on the death of one of the skeleton lords. So probably shouldn't have done that. Even though I goofed, it's still not that bad because your arrows are strong enough to stun them for a second, so most of the time they can't even catch up to you. Upon heading back to Harvest Valley, it is very important that you talk to Galavan here so he moves to the next area, because once he's there, he will sell infinite poison arrows, which is pretty freaking swell of him if you ask me. After that, we skedaddle back to the Shaded Woods so we can beat the next boss and then find him at the next location. Doesn't take too long to get to the Scorpioness Nagasaki, and this is an easy one. I did get blasted by her magic at the very beginning like an absolute fool, but other than that, you just wait for her to dig her claws into the ground or something, and you can shoot her like 2 or 3 times between attacks. Whenever she goes into the ground, just stand on the concrete and pop her a few times as soon as she comes back out. At the end of the fight, I did try to get a nice old 360 no-scope for my Modern Warfare 2 montage, but I stepped too far off the concrete and got stepped on, which normally I wouldn't mind, but it almost killed me, so I was more frightened than aroused this time. Now that she's been defeated, we can move on to the next location, and we find our husky pal, who is now selling us infinite poison arrows, which are some of, if not the best arrows in the game, as long as you're not fighting something resistant or immune to poison. So we head back to Harvest Valley, where all the enemies are resistant or immune to poison. Great. Doesn't take me too long to get to the blob, who is, surprise, resistant to poison, so don't waste your arrows on him like I did for most of the fight, and yeah, no notes. Easiest fight in the game. Not much happens on the way to the next boss, but don't forget to set this entirely metal object on fire, because logic.
Who can relate? Woo!
And, don't do any of this.
I broke my back. Spinal.
I did have to be very careful fighting these fire-throwing ladies because I'm pretty weak to fire and her thigh-high boots, but the fire attacks do a ton of damage. Once we get past them, I make it to the Baneful Queen, and it goes without saying that she is, in fact, immune to poison, and will, in fact, heal if she sits in the outer ring of poison, so don't let her do that. Other than that, it's not too bad. She only has like 4 or 5 different attacks, and I never really got the timing down on the spear attacks, but if you just stay on the outer ring and circle around her, you can usually dodge an attack and shoot an arrow or two. The best move is when she tries to give you head, because right after politely declining, you could hit her with 1 arrow and then she'll take a dive for it, and then you can hit her with 2 more. And if you're wondering, if you kill the boss at the same time as you die, it does not count, and you have to do it again. Thank you, Dark Souls. Now that she's finished, we could head to Iron Keep to get a tasty little upgrade. First, we gotta make our way through a handful of enemies that all die in about 2 or 3 shots. And once we pull some levers, spin some wheels, and grab a dragon bone, make a sketchy jump where I almost met my demise, we can then grab the Barbie Ember. Take that over to this crackhead, and gee willikers, he starts selling infinite iron arrows that will completely replace the wooden ones. He also now sells large titanite and iron great arrows if you decide to use a great bow, which I definitely will later on when I get one. Next, I head back to the Door of Pharaohs, turn this dude into a Beyblade. Once that's done, you just fall into this sand hole and, believe it or not, straight to Ohio. Blast the Crystal Boy for a dragon bone, and oh yeah, killing this big motherfucker in the shaded woods gets you another one, but I forgot to mention that earlier. While you're here, you might as well use a branch on this statue to get the Fang Key, open the door to this big bird babe, and she'll move over to where we just were and sells infinite fire arrows, which is convenient since the next boss is weak to fire. Right around the corner, we can grab another dragon bone off this rotten corpse, upgrade our weapon, equip our fire arrows, and make our way to the average day in Australia simulator. And I hope you like NASCAR, because this fight is a whole lot of going around in circles and not much else. Occasionally you'll have to dodge a little baby spider, and it could be pretty annoying trying to hit her in the head with her big old arms in the way all the time, but basically you just need to watch out for when she tries to smash you or beam you to death, but that's also a good opportunity to get a couple shots in if you're feeling confident. The hardest part of this fight is just getting over my arachnophobia, but it did give me the idea to start 360 no-scoping spiders in my house with a bow, so I don't actually have to get near them, so that's nice. After that, I head down the hall, kill this spooky fella, and head to the bonfire where they maliciously put an enemy in the room just so you have a chance to lose all your souls right after a boss fight. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. That was a pretty rotten thing for them to do, so I decided to go fight the rotten. Mostly because it was the shortest distance to travel from the bonfire, and I couldn't remember how this fight goes, as you can tell by the way I gracefully walk into burning pits of fire and eat his giant sword for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and possibly a midnight snack if I'm feeling a little peckish. I managed to beat him my first try since he's pretty slow, and walking into the fire multiple times reminded me of my fire arrows, which he's not exactly weak to, but they do seem to do more damage than my other ones, so I use those. And boom bada boom, almost die at the end, finish him off, and he's really gonna be rotting now. In hell. Next, I decide to live out my dreams as an exterminator and head for the Rat Vanguard. Him and his goons are weak to fire, so I equip those, but annoyingly, it just barely doesn't do enough damage to one-shot them and leaves them with like a fart of health left. So I switch to the Dragon Rider bow instead, and that does the trick. Anyway, just run around, popping some rats until Chuck the Ratman Liddell comes out, and I kill him in like 5 shots. My thirst for rat blood has still not yet been quenched, so I headed for the Rat Authority next, and this was the first boss that I really struggled with in a while, which isn't really surprising because I always struggle with this one. Luckily, the most annoying part of the fight is pretty easy now, since you can just pop all the little rats as soon as you walk through the door, so you don't have to worry about getting poisoned in like the first 5 seconds of the fight. I would basically just wait for him to do a charging attack, try to roll into it, and then pop some shots right after. He'll usually do a follow-up attack if you're close enough, so you can use that to your advantage to get a couple more shots off. Once you beat the piss out of him enough, he'll throw up from the pain, and that's the perfect opportunity to finish him off. I checked Become the World's Greatest Rat Exterminator off my bucket bucket list and headed to the only place left, being the Iron Keep. So I clear it out, make it to the Smelter Demon, who I was not excited for. Turns out I was being a scared little bitch because I beat him my first try. It definitely helps that with a ranged weapon, it is much easier to avoid taking damage from the raw energy he radiates, so I just do your best to not get close to him, physically or emotionally. And poison arrows. Poison arrows definitely help. It only takes a few of them, and you can just watch that health bar start ticking away. I was able to avoid most of his attacks by just dodging forward and to the right a little bit, except for that one. Man, that one. After that, you could rematch the old Persussi over here and get the upgraded version of the Ring of Blades. Basically the same fight as before, except my bow didn't break, so it only took a fraction of the time. After that, I frolicked my way through the level pretty easily, got my bussy ate up by this ravenous little fella, and if that wasn't enough abuse, this man just absolutely pancakes my cock and balls, just absolutely obliterates it, turns it to dust. Third time's the charm, I make it safe and sound to the old Iron King and promptly get my ass handed to me no less than 12 times. That is until I realized that just like Devin Haney, the old Iron King's hands are pretty weak. Also similar to Devin Haney, shooting him in the chest with an arrow will hurt him pretty bad, so either one works. Basically, I just hid back in this corner, popping shots at him when I could, but sometimes his fire can reach you and sometimes it can't, and I had a hard time telling which one was which in the heat of the moment. So I would just run out and roll through the fire, which was pretty risky, but it did work out most of the time. I managed to poison him at the end, so he was taking damage as he transitioned to his second phase, took one more shot, and that was that. Now that we've taken out the 4 main bosses, we could finally head back to Drangalang Castle, and these bastards have perfected some sort of invisible barrier technology that's really fucking annoying, to be honest. And after damning all these poor soldiers' souls into this bowl thing, the door opens to the castle, and we get access to this NPC. He sells infinite lightning and magic arrows and infinite repair kits, which might come in handy since the bows are pretty fragile. Ah yes, the classic completely empty 5x5 room that everyone has in their home to jerk off in. My favorite. Hey, I'm the guy from the cover of the game. Eventually, I stumbled upon the Hunter's Black Bow, which a lot of people consider to be the best bow in the game, and it's gonna replace the short bow after I get it upgraded. Then I make my way to the Twin Dragon Riders, now with 2 times the Dragon Rider for the same great low price. It is very easy. Just use poison arrows on the archer, and then switch to lightning arrows, which does a ton of damage to him, but apparently they're weak to like everything, so you could use whatever your little heart desires. Rider number 2 wasn't much more of a challenge, basically just does the same attack like over and over. He's got a lot more health, but goes down almost as quick as his blue brother. After that, I upgraded my bow, continued through the castle, doing a whole lot of shooting, some blasting, maybe some popping even, and it was a good time. I made my way up to the Looking Glass Knight, and it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. In fact, he normally summons more than just one other guy, but I killed him too fast for him to summon another one. I didn't even have to fight his little goon, he just kinda chased me around being all useless and stuff, while I just shot at the mirror-wielding menace over here. I probably shouldn't have used fire arrows though, because being in the rain makes fire weaker, but I'm a little slow and didn't think of that. Still got the upside down M though. This goes kinda hard, not gonna lie. Might screenshot for later. Next, I headed to the Shrine of Amana, which is normally pretty annoying, but using a bow is probably one of the easiest ways to do it. Eventually, I make it to the Frog Foreskin boss, who is weak to magic, so I equipped some magic arrows, and it was pretty damn easy. Only got hit once or twice. Sadly, you can't hit him when he's in foreskin mode, but as soon as he pops his little head out, you can just go crazy on him, and I was pretty happy with my performance. Until I immediately fell into the water, lost my souls, and the overwhelming sadness I carry returned once again. Now we could head on over to the Undead Crypt, where most of the enemies are weak to either lightning or magic, so I equipped both of those, and if you talk to this light-hating Organization 13 ass fella without a torch in your hand, he'll insult you and then sell you infinite dark arrows, which is worth the verbal abuse. Also, a lot of people seem to really want to fuck this guy. Getting through the next area is pretty easy for the most part until these guys snitch to the wizard police and they burn you alive pretty quickly. You also can't break the bells that summon these assholes, which caused me to be a victim multiple times. But I was curious if it was possible with the Great Bow. Without going into the DLC, the only one that I can get that you don't have to farm for is by trading the Old King's Soul, which you can get only by killing the Old Iron King in New Game Plus or using a bonfire aesthetic. So I used one of those, smushed this guy with my butt, and fought the New Game Plus version of the Old Iron King. And yeah, same thing, but more health. So I head off to trade his soul for the bow, which she did for free this time because of my overwhelming riz, I suppose. I headed back to the bells, and yes, they do in fact break them with about 3 arrows. Alright, that's enough lollygagging for now, so I head off to the next boss, who is also weak to lightning. This is usually one of the harder ones for me, but with a bow, it makes it pretty trivial. All of his attacks in the first phase are melee, and they're super easy to dodge, so I just keep my distance, dodge an attack, back away, and keep shooting. Eventually, he'll give himself a defense defense buff, so I'm doing about half the damage now, and he adds a ranged attack, which I did not manage to dodge a single time. To be fair, he only used it twice. Nice. You also might notice these schizo notes on the floor leading to the lever, and if you pull the lever and talk to this man while you're in human form, you can buy infinite fire and lightning and destructive great arrows. After that, I made the executive decision to slay the next dragon boss with the Dragon Slayer bow, because, you know, it's in the name and whatnot. So now we can test if the Dragon Slayer bow really do be slaying them dragons. He is weak to magic and dark, but there are no magic and dark great arrows in the game, so I just stuck with the destructive arrows, which was plenty good enough because I was taking huge chunks from his health with every shot. Obviously, the great bows shoot a lot slower than the little baby dick bows, but they hit like a truck thrown by a bigger truck to make up for it. Most of the attacks are pretty easy to dodge, and I only got hit one time, so not bad. As I stepped out to the next area to see the dozens of dragons flying around, my bow was absolutely quivering with anticipation. And slay dragons I did, and this guy. It's pretty comical just knocking him down over and over because the silly little guy just cannot hit me when he's holding a 10-pound arrow in his chest. I make it to the next boss, which is another dragon, but much bigger this time. And he's got this funny little quirk where he basically one-shots me with every single attack. So I figured I might as well use the red tearstone ring because this man has approximately an assload of health. This took me more attempts than any other boss in the game so far, and it took about 15 minutes to do the entire fight. You basically just have to get in his face at a decent distance and he'll either fly up into the air or start to spew fire. And when he flies up into the air, that's when you have to run away as far as possible, as fast as possible, because this attack covers a very large area. Otherwise, he'll most likely start to lift his head to shoot fire, and 99% of the time I would just run to the right to avoid it, but every once in a while he decides to switch it up and go to the left just to be a dick. All in all, it was very stressful, and I almost messed up at the very end when I tried to shoot him out of the sky but completely whiffed it, and I saw God for a second, but I ran up to him just in time and delivered the killing blow. And would you just look at this cold ass pose you strike when you're holding the bow. Goes stupid hard. Next I go through the memories to get the giant souls, and I finally get to use the dark arrows since the giants here are weak to them, including the boss. And there's not much to say about him. I beat him first try, although I did let him step on me a few times just for the thrill. And now that we have all the giant souls, we can go take out King Vendrick. I did get got by him a couple times because if you get hit once, he usually follows it up with more attacks that can be pretty hard to dodge, and he usually two-shots me. All you really have to do though is just keep backing away as he slowly and endlessly marches towards you, occasionally trying to knock your head off like Sean Strickland with a sword. Before we go face the last couple bosses, I have to unlock the Dark Lurker fight by pledging my immortal soul to the Dark Covenant, making it 2 times darker and 2 times soulier. Once you do that, we have to go through 3 separate dungeon areas, and these motherfuckers ain't no joke. And your main goal in all of them is basically to light this thing on fire and then toss yourself into 3 separate dark holes, which I think is a reference to Dark Souls 3. And if you do die to the Dark Lurker, you have to do a dungeon of your choice again every single time to try the boss fight. Yippee. He is weak to lightning, so that's what I used, and the first half of the fight is very easy actually. He only has like 3 or 4 attacks, most of them are ranged, and if you just run to the side or run forward for the dark orb, they're pretty easy to dodge. It does get much harder in the second half though, when you have to fight 2 lurkers for the price of 1. Luckily they share a health bar, but now you have to watch for when the other one is doing a ranged attack while the other is trying to stab you with his magic glowy sword thing. This is normally one of the hardest bosses in the game with melee, but it only took me about 3 tries with the bow, which is still technically more than most of the bosses so far, but still not that hard. You also get rewarded with an entire outfit after you beat him, and I was expecting it to be like really dark and edgy, but no, it was the opposite. I look like burnt cheese. Now we could face the last 2 bosses, so I head back to the castle and face the Throne Watcher and Defender. She just be watching while he actually defends. Pretty lopsided relationship if you ask me. And for the second to last boss fight in the game, you might be surprised that it is also very easy. It did take me 2 attempts since they have a deceptively long range, as you can see how I get hit like every 5 seconds. But it's very easy to heal right afterwards since their combos aren't very long or damaging. All you really have to do is just keep backing up, dodging every once in a while, try not to fall off the edge, and keep blasting them. Really not much else to it. Once you get them to about half health, they will power up their weapons, but they don't get any like crazy hard to dodge attacks or anything. They basically fight the same except a little more glowy, I guess. And right after you beat them, before you even get to spend all your many souls, souls, you get to fight Nashandra, the real final boss. Her biggest threat is that she summons these super spooky orbs that hurt you and curse you when you get near them, but that's kind of ineffective when you have ranged attacks. Other than that, she basically just keeps using the same kind of beam that the Dark Lurker was using that you can kind of just sidestep and just keep shooting her a ton. Every once in a while, she'll try to close in on you with her scythe, but it's usually not too hard to dodge. And yeah, that's basically it. I was able to beat her first try, even after fighting the Throne Watcher and Defender. And the ironic thing is that after beating Nashandra, you could trade her soul for what is considered by a lot of people to also be one of the best bows in the game. Now this bow already comes with lightning damage no matter which arrow you use, and it has a special attack that's like a supercharged lightning arrow or something. That doesn't actually use arrows, but it does degrade your weapon really fast from using it, but you could use a bracing knuckle ring to slow it down if you really want to use it. And after respecking some more points into Faith, upgrading the bow to the max, and infusing it with lightning for even more lightning per lightning, a single headshot with a lightning arrow will one-shot them, and a body shot from the special attack will also one-shot them. Against an enemy that's weak to lightning, it does around the same damage as a Dragon Slayer bow with the Great Lightning Arrow, which is pretty crazy considering I can shoot the bow of one like 2 or 3 times in the time it takes me to shoot one from the Dragon Slayer bow. But obviously it won't be as effective against enemies that are resistant or just not weak to lightning. Regardless, I am excited to use this in the DLC, and if you're wondering, apparently I did die 68 times total, and about half of that was from the old Iron King and the Ancient Dragon. And before I started the DLC, I wanted to get the Ring of Blades +2 by using a bonfire aesthetic at the King's Passage bonfire, and then simply fight 2 pursuers at the same time. Oof.
Who's laughing now? I got my ring.